There's a certain quietness to country life that settles into your bones before you even realize it's happening, a kind of stillness that wraps around the edges of the day, softening everything it touches. The wind moves differently out here, carrying the scent of grass and earth instead of gasoline and concrete. The mornings are slow, not lazy but deliberate, each moment unfolding like a page in a book you've already read 100 times, yet still find comforting. And the afternoons, especially the warm ones, feel like time itself is stretching out, offering room to breathe. That's how the day began, ordinary, familiar, gentle. One of those afternoons where nothing unusual should have happened. One of those days where life on the farm usually follows the rhythm it always has, a rhythm built on routine, on habit, on the simple partnership between land and the people who tend it. I woke up believing it would be no different from the hundreds of quiet days before it. I had no reason to suspect otherwise, no hint that something unexpected was gathering quietly underneath the surface of things. I remember walking across the yard, brushing loose hay from my hands, listening to the faint crunch of gravel under my boots. Sunlight warmed the back of my neck as it filtered through the leaves of the old oak tree. Birds called from the fence posts, the same calls I'd heard for years, the same melodies I could almost hum along to. It all felt so normal, comfortably normal. The kind of normal that makes you believe you understand your life completely. Our farm isn't large, at least not by the standards of big ranchers or those fancy spreadouts you see in magazines. It's modest, tucked among rolling fields and bordered by a creek that murmurs along the edge of the property. It's been in our family for a while now, not because of inheritance or some proud lineage, but simply because we stayed. We built our life here after everyone else left for brighter lights or more predictable careers, and no matter how tough things got, no matter the storms or the long winters or the years when the crops didn't do as well as we hoped, this place stayed ours. It was never perfect, but it was home. And at the very heart of what made this place feel like more than dirt and wood and fences was Ash, our horse. Ash wasn't just an animal we fed twice a day. He wasn't just a working horse, though he had pulled his share of weight through the years. To me, he was a companion in a way words don't quite capture. He had a steadiness that made everything feel anchored. Whenever things felt overwhelming, whenever the world outside seemed too loud or too heavy, I'd find my way to him. Just being near him made the noise fade, leaning my forehead against his warm flank, breathing in the smell of hay and dust and something distinctly him felt like stepping into a quiet place no one else could reach. Animals carry no pretense. They don't manipulate your emotions, they don't pretend to understand you, they simply exist beside you, accepting you in whatever shape you show up. I've always believed that animals feel more deeply than we give them credit for. They pick up on energies we gloss over. They react to truths we're too distracted or too afraid to see. And Ash, with those dark, thoughtful eyes and that quiet patience, felt like the purest soul in the whole place. But even his presence, his constant grounding presence, would not be enough to steady the earth under my feet that day. It started with something so small, so ordinary at first, that I didn't recognize its significance. My husband approached me across the yard with a kind of jittery energy I hadn't seen in him before. His footsteps were quick but not hurried. His expression was eager but threaded with something sharper, something that prickled at the edge of my awareness. He was smiling in a way that felt familiar yet different, like an old photograph with new colors painted over it. My husband has always been a dreamer. He's the kind of man whose mind is always racing ahead, looking for a spark, a novel idea, a moment worth capturing. Sometimes it's adorable, sometimes it's exhausting. Most days I admire that about him, the way he sees possibility in the smallest things, the way he tries to turn our quiet life into something others might find interesting or inspiring. He loves the idea of sharing pieces of farm life online, little clips of our routines or glimpses of the animals simply being themselves. And I won't lie, sometimes it's sweet, sometimes it even makes me proud. But that afternoon, something about the way he was moving, the way his eyes seemed too bright, unsettled me. It wasn't excitement, not the kind I was used to. It was something more urgent, more insistent, like he had already crossed a mental line without me and I was just being informed after the fact. Before he even spoke, I felt my stomach tighten a little. He approached with his hands slightly lifted, as if holding an invisible idea between them. "I've been thinking," he said, a breath of anticipation escaping with the words. I didn't think anything of it at first. I actually chuckled, expecting him to tell me he had figured out a new way to fix the sagging gate or planned a silly video of Ash refusing to eat the carrots unless they were peeled. Those were the kinds of ideas he normally brought me. Light-hearted, harmless, but then he kept talking, and as he talked, that faint tug of intuition I'd felt grew stronger, pulling at me in a way I could no longer ignore. He painted the idea with enthusiasm, describing how it would be unique, how it would catch eyes, how no one else had done something like this before. Every sentence made my chest feel tighter, yet he didn't notice. Or maybe he noticed and ignored it. I'm still not sure. I listened because I always did. I listened because he was my husband, because we'd built a life together, because trust had always been the invisible thread connecting everything we shared. But while I stood there nodding slowly, something cold began to spread through me, an unease I couldn't shake. Ash stood nearby, lifting his head slightly as if sensing a shift in the air. His ears flicked back, then forward, then back again. He wasn't restless, not exactly, but alert in a way that mirrored the stirring inside me. Animals have a way of knowing. They sense tension long before words reveal it. They understand discomfort long before we admit it out loud. My husband continued explaining his plan with excitement that almost masked the truth behind it, almost. Because there was something else tucked beneath that excitement, something he wasn't saying, something he was avoiding. When he finally paused, I swallowed hard and asked, "What exactly do you want me to do?" He brushed off the question with a reassuring smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nothing dramatic," he said lightly. "Just be yourself. You and Ash, your connection always shows. People love that. It's real." I wish I could say that eased me. I wish I could say I brushed aside the discomfort, but the word camera hung in the air between us like a heavy weight. It wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't. It was the tripod standing nearby, it was the faint blinking light. He had everything set up before even speaking to me. He had decided without me, and that was the first crack in the day. He led the way into the barn, where shafts of sunlight spilled through the narrow gaps between the old wooden boards. Dust drifted lazily through the air, sparkling in the glow like tiny flecks of gold. The familiar scent of hay and old timber usually calmed me, wrapping me in its comforting, earthy embrace. But not this time. With the camera pointed my way, the air felt heavier than it had just hours earlier. It felt like the walls were leaning in, listening. My husband busied himself with adjusting the angle, tweaking the height, shifting the light. His movements were smooth, practiced, almost too practiced, as if he'd rehearsed this without telling me. That thought wormed its way into my mind and stayed there, persistent and undeniable. I stood still, hands resting against Ash's warm neck, trying to ignore the tightening feeling growing in the pit of my stomach. I wanted to believe this was harmless. I wanted to trust him as I always had, but something wasn't right. There was something he wasn't telling me. "Run through it again," I said quietly, my voice catching on the edges of the unease building inside me. "What exactly are we doing?" He didn't answer with the clarity I needed. Instead, he repeated what felt like a rehearsed line. "Just trust me, it'll be great, trust me." 2 words that had once been comforting, 2 words that now felt like a door shutting in my face. Ash shifted beside me, the soft thud of his hoof meeting the barn floor echoing my own anxious heartbeat. I stroked his neck, letting the movement ground me, but even his presence couldn't steady everything twisting inside me. Then it happened. The sound was tiny, almost nothing, a soft click like a mechanical whisper. But it was enough. My eyes snapped toward the camera. The small blinking light had changed. It wasn't just recording, it was broadcasting. "We're live?" I asked, my voice breaking through the quiet with a sharpness that startled even me. He didn't look up. He didn't acknowledge the fear rising in my chest. "It's fine," he said quickly. "Just go with it. You're doing great." But I wasn't doing anything, and he knew it. "You went live without telling me," I said, louder, more forcefully. This time he met my eyes, and in that brief moment the truth flickered through his expression. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't excitement clouding his judgment. This was a choice. He had made the decision alone. He had pushed past boundaries I never thought he'd cross. Something inside me broke then, not loudly, not dramatically, but the kind of break that's quiet and deep and unmistakable. The comments began rolling in on the small screen of the camera. Lines of text I couldn't fully make out. I caught glimpses, questions, jokes, confused reactions, maybe even concern. Strangers watching. Strangers intruding on a moment I never agreed to share. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Then again, the notifications piling up, friends asking what was going on, family wondering if everything was okay, people I barely talked to sending messages of confusion. I felt exposed, cornered, betrayed. My voice rose again, trembling. "You crossed a line." He waved his hands dismissively as though my fear were nothing more than drama. "People love authenticity, the raw stuff. Just relax. It's only for a little while." But it wasn't about the live stream. It was about the trust he cracked open without hesitation. Something inside me refused to stay silent anymore. The part of me that always tried to smooth things over, always tried to understand his intentions, stepped aside. I walked straight toward the camera, feeling the burn of anger and hurt ripple up my spine. He said my name sharply, trying to stop me. But I didn't pause. I reached out and ended the live stream myself. The screen went dark instantly, and the barn fell into a silence so heavy it felt like it had weight. He stared at me, shocked, confused, angry, maybe even scared of what my reaction revealed. "Why would you do that?" he asked. But the real question, the one that shouldn't have needed asking, came from me. "Why did you?" My hands were still shaking when I turned from him. Ash nudged my shoulder, grounding presence I desperately needed. I let my fingers slide along his mane, breathing in deeply in an attempt to calm the storm inside me. That's when I noticed it. A small envelope tucked into the side pocket of Ash's saddlebag. Something I hadn't put there, something that didn't belong. I frowned, pulling it out slowly. My heartbeat thudded louder with each second. The paper was slightly crinkled, as though it had been handled nervously, maybe repeatedly. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was his. I unfolded the note with trembling fingers, the soft crinkle sounding impossibly loud in the stillness of the barn. The message was short, hastily written. The ink uneven in places like his hand wasn't steady when he wrote it. "I know you saw the messages. I couldn't let this get out. The video had to distract them." My breath caught. "Messages? What messages?" A cold sensation crawled across my skin. My mind raced, replaying every strange expression he'd worn that day, every half answer, every forced smile. "What does this mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer at first. His gaze dropped to the floor. His shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before, a mixture of defeat and dread. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "It's not what you think. I was trying to protect you." Protect me from what? The silence that followed. That question was worse than any loud confession could have been. It was the silence of someone who knew they had been caught in a web of their own making. Someone who knew they could no longer hide behind excuses or creative justifications. He finally exhaled, a long, heavy breath. "There's something I haven't told you," he said. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." The truth spilled out in fragmented pieces, each one sharper than the last. He'd been hiding something. Information, conversations, a situation he didn't want anyone to know about. Something he feared would come back to hurt us both. Something he thought could be buried under the noise of a viral distraction. Instead of confronting it, instead of confiding in me, he had tried to divert attention with that live stream. He had tried to use me, our home, our horse, our trust as a shield against something he was terrified of facing. The weight of that knowledge settled over me like a cold, suffocating blanket. My heart felt heavy in a way that was almost physical. Betrayal layered itself thickly over everything I thought was solid between us. We stood there in the barn for what felt like an eternity, though only minutes passed. The air between us was thick, with everything unspoken. His guilt, my hurt, the hollow ache where trust once lived effortlessly. That night, after the barn had gone quiet and the sun had dipped behind the hills, we talked. The kind of talk that scrapes at old wounds and opens new ones. A painful conversation, raw and necessary. Words neither of us wanted to say, but both needed to hear. We uncovered things that had been buried too long. We sat with truths that tasted bitter. And in the end, the only thing we could agree on was that we needed space to breathe. Space to see clearly again. Space to decide whether trust could be rebuilt, or whether we were simply clinging to the memory of what once was. The farm didn't change in the days that followed. Life here doesn't pause for heartbreak. The animals still needed feeding. The gates still needed latching. The fields still stretched across the horizon as though nothing had shattered inside the barn that day. Ash remained steady, meeting me each morning with the same quiet warmth that had always calmed me. He didn't care about live streams or secrets or mistakes. He cared only that I showed up, that I tended to him, that I spoke to him in the soft tone he recognized. But I had changed. Something inside me had shifted permanently. I walked through each day with a new awareness, a new caution, a new understanding of how fragile trust could be, even in a place built on routine and familiarity. The live stream never made it online again. The footage was deleted. The world never saw the moment my trust fractured. And I realized slowly and steadily that not every story is meant to be broadcast. Not every piece of our lives belongs to strangers watching behind a screen. Some stories, especially the painful ones, are lessons meant for the people who live them, not for an audience craving entertainment. Ash is still here. The farm is still standing. I'm still waking up to the steady rhythm of chores and the hum of normal life. But the space between my husband and me remains delicate, pulled thin by the weight of what happened. Trust doesn't return simply because you want it to. It grows slowly, cautiously, step by step, and sometimes it doesn't grow back at all. Sometimes the hardest part of loving someone isn't the arguments or the apologies. It's learning what to do when the foundation between you cracks and deciding whether rebuilding is worth the effort it demands. And that is where this part of my story settles, not with a dramatic ending, not with a neatly tied bow, but with a quiet truth. Trust, once broken, becomes something you must choose to nurture or choose to walk away from, a choice I'm still learning how to make. One day at a time, beneath the steadfast gaze of a horse who has never once broken mine.